Welcome back to Quiet Reckonings, the space where those who spent decades staying silent finally share the truths that took a lifetime to articulate, and where families learn what real presence actually costs. If stories about breaking generational cycles and standing up to unspoken boundaries resonate with you, please consider dropping a comment below and subscribing to the channel. Now, before we dive into how a single night destroyed my relationship with my entire extended family, let me give you the 30-second breakdown of what happened. In April of last year, my 8-year-old daughter was recovering from emergency cardiac surgery. I took a single picture of her in her hospital bed, pale, connected to monitors, but alive, and sent it to a 14-person family group text. I wrote, "She's in recovery. She asks if anyone is coming." My brother replied first, "Too slammed. Figure it out." My mother responded next, "She made it through. Stop making her medical drama our burden." Not a single one of the other 12 family members said a word. I typed back, "Understood," set my phone face down, and wept in an empty stairwell so my daughter wouldn't hear me. Exactly 3 months later, at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, my mother and brother dropped their phones in shock at the exact same second in 2 different parts of the city. But before I explain what appeared on the local news broadcast that night, you need to understand what my family was doing with my daughter's illness while I was sitting alone in that pediatric intensive care unit. Because those 2 cold text messages were only the beginning. My name is Evelyn Vance. I'm 35 years old, and I work as a senior bookkeeper for a small auditing firm in Akron, Ohio. Balancing ledgers for a living teaches you a lot of things, but the most important lesson is this. Numbers don't lie, but people lie within numbers all the time. I live in a modest 2-bedroom rental on the north side of town with my 8-year-old daughter, Clara. Clara is observant, dry-witted, and draws pictures of our family in bright crayon regardless of whether those people have ever shown up for her. She was born with a severe congenital heart defect that required surgical correction when she was just an infant. She has a long, faint scar running down the center of her chest. She calls it her zipper, and she talks about it with the nonchalance of a kid describing a favorite jacket. My mother, Eleanor, lives 20 minutes south in the suburban colonial home where my brother and I were raised, the kind of house with a perfectly manicured lawn, an ornamental wreath on the front door, and a church directory resting permanently next to the landline. My older brother, Marcus, is 39, works in high-end commercial real estate, and smiles down at commuter traffic from 3 separate billboards along the interstate. He has a $1 million smile that looks great in promotional brochures. Our father passed away nearly 10 years ago from sudden cardiac arrest. Heart problems run in the Vance bloodline. But so does our family's specific strategy for dealing with tragedy. Ensure that the public sees us handling it with dignity, regardless of how hollow things are on the inside. I put myself through accounting school starting at age 19, paying my own tuition night class by night class, working double shifts at a diner. Early on, I realized the foundational rule of our household. Affection in the Vance family was a bill you paid by never inconveniencing anyone else. I was the reliable child who absorbed problems quietly. Marcus was the charismatic child who made announcements. My mother managed the narrative between us. For over 30 years, that implicit contract held together, mostly because whenever the arrangement hurt me, I relied on the default phrase I had been trained to speak. "It's fine. It's okay." By late February, that arrangement was brought to a screeching halt. It was during Clara's routine annual cardiology screening, an appointment I had sat through a dozen times before while flipping through old waiting room magazines. But that afternoon, the echocardiogram took twice as long as usual. The ultrasound technician went completely quiet, stopped making small talk, and left the room. A few minutes later, Dr. Sterling, the pediatric cardiologist, stepped in and closed the heavy door behind her with a deliberate, gentle slowness that sent a chill straight down my spine. The valve repair performed during Clara's infancy was failing far faster than anticipated. Dr. Sterling spoke in calm, clinical terminology, regurgitation, chamber dilation, surgical window, and then she uttered a single sentence that contained no clinical detachment at all. "We cannot afford to wait past the spring." Open heart surgery. A complete valve replacement at the Regional Children's Hospital in Cleveland, an hour and a half north, scheduled within the next 6 to 8 weeks. When the ground moves beneath my feet, my instinct is to organize. I went out to my car in the parking garage, pulled out a notepad, and began making a logistical checklist. I called our health insurance provider immediately, sitting on hold long enough to memorize the automated background music. I took detailed notes on out-of-pocket maximums, deductible resets, pre-authorizations, and temporary housing near the medical center. Then, out of sheer force of habit, I called my mother. I told her that her granddaughter was going to need open-chest surgery to survive. There was a long silence on the line. Through the receiver, I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the antique pendulum clock in her hallway. My mother's very first question was not whether Clara was frightened, or how I was holding up, or what the statistical prognosis looked like. Her first question was, "Have you mentioned this to anyone in the community yet?" I stared at my reflection in the driver's side window, unable to comprehend why that was her priority. Within 48 hours, I understood completely. By the following weekend, without a single phone call or text to request my permission, my 8-year-old daughter's school portrait, her missing front tooth, blue Sunday dress, and wide smile, was plastered across a public crowdfunding platform asking total strangers for financial donations. The campaign was titled Hope for Clara. Marcus had set it up on a Friday evening, and by Saturday afternoon, it featured a dramatic, polished narrative about our family's courageous battle, complete with a fundraising target that had 5 figures and plenty of zeros. He never asked me. He never even sent me a link. I discovered the page when a coworker approached me in the office break room, squeezed my arm sympathetically, and mentioned she had contributed $50. My mother shared the link to every social circle, church group, and neighborhood roster she was part of, appending the phrase, "Prayer warriors, our little angel needs a miracle." Within a week, the campaign gained traction locally. A local television station picked it up for a human interest segment. I want you to picture how that interview was staged, because the visual arrangement tells the entire story. Marcus sat front and center in a tailored navy blazer. My mother sat right next to him, holding a framed 6x8 photograph of Clara. I was invited to stand behind the couch, slightly out of focus, resembling an afterthought who was expected to look solemn on cue. The news anchor asked Marcus what the overwhelming public support meant to him personally. Marcus placed his hand over his heart, looked straight into the camera lens, and said, "Family is the only thing that truly matters to us." By midnight, the donation counter surpassed $60,000. I will be completely honest with you. A small part of me felt relieved at first. Medical procedures are astronomically expensive, even with health insurance. I have never possessed the kind of foolish pride that turned single individual. Not the hospital's billing department, not Clara's legal guardian, but the campaign creator who retained sole withdrawal privileges, Marcus Vance. I didn't simply sit back and assume things would work out. During the second week of March, when the surgical coordinator sent over the advance paperwork, I emailed Marcus formally. I attached the hospital's pre-admission estimate and requested that he either transfer the campaign balance to my banking account or issue a direct payment to the medical center's finance department. I copied my mother on the thread. I even attached the platform's step-by-step instructions for transferring campaign ownership to a patient's parent. Instead of replying in writing, Marcus called my phone. He informed me in his practiced, smooth sales voice that the money was sitting safely in an account, that proper financial protocols were being observed, and that I needed to stop being paranoid and trust the family. A few days later, he did provide funds, a check for $2,500. I know the exact figure because he handed it to me in a commercial parking lot in the form of a giant novelty poster board check. A photographer hired by his real estate firm took photos for the campaign update page. The caption read, "Initial disbursement delivered to our brave little fighter." The comment section exploded with heart emojis and praise. Here was the reality of my position. The crowdfunding platform grants full administrative authority to the creator. Without filing a formal lawsuit, I had no immediate mechanism to seize control of those funds. And with my daughter's surgery scheduled in less than a month, alongside packed work schedules and medical consultations in another city, I had neither the time nor the resources to launch a legal battle. You cannot manage a legal dispute and prepare a child for major surgery simultaneously. So I did the one thing within my control. I purchased a heavy-duty gray 3-ring binder. Plain, unpretentious, and precise. I began documenting and printing every single piece of evidence. Screenshots of the total raised, transaction timestamps, public statements, and copies of that ridiculous novelty check. Pure administrative habit. It would become crucial later. They wheeled Clara down the surgical corridor at precisely 7:15 a.m. on the morning of April 12th. She was wearing a small fabric cap patterned with smiling yellow stars, and she reminded the attending nurse to be careful with her zipper. I signed the final release forms, forcing my hand to remain steady, and then sat down in the surgical waiting lounge. I spent 9 straight hours in that waiting room, learning the physical layout of the floor by heart. 14 linoleum squares between my vinyl chair and the coffee dispenser. I sent an update to the 14-member family group operating room. A cousin sent back a thumb-up emoji. Nothing from my mother. Nothing from Marcus. Around midday, a floor nurse named Sarah brought me a warm cup of tea I hadn't ordered, sat down briefly, and whispered, "No parent should have to count floor tiles by themselves." I have reflected on that small act of human kindness more times than I can count. At 4 in the afternoon, I pulled out my phone to check for updates from the surgical coordinator. My thumb reflexively opened a social media app, and that was how I discovered where my family actually was. They were hosting the Hope for Clara Gala. It was taking place in the grand ballroom of a downtown hotel in Akron. Fairy lights wrapped around marble pillars. A step-and-repeat banner printed with my daughter's face repeated across the backdrop. My mother was wearing a floor-length dark gown with a satin sash across her chest that read Team Clara. Marcus stood at a wooden podium wearing a tux. The live stream update had been uploaded while my daughter was mid-procedure. The post description read, "Tonight, we gather to celebrate resilience and community." They had scheduled an elaborate fundraising gala in her honor on the exact day of her open-heart surgery, 90 miles away, without informing me, and without coming to the hospital. I sat with that realization. You sit with something like that the way you sit with a broken bone. Breathing shallowly, avoiding any sudden movement. Then the double doors swung open, and Dr. Sterling stepped out wearing her surgical cap. The world fell completely quiet as I looked at her face, waiting to learn if my child was still alive. The operation was successful. The replacement valve was functioning properly, the pressure gradients were stable, and Dr. Sterling used the word ideal while I gripped her forearm with both hands. I was allowed into the pediatric intensive care unit that evening. Clara was exceptionally pale, surrounded by heart monitors for lines and surgical drains. But around 8:30, she drifted back into consciousness, locked eyes with me, and asked the question she had been holding on to. "Did Grandma come?" I swallowed hard and whispered, "Grandma knows you're resting safely." Clara gave a weak, serious nod and murmured, "Tell her my zipper is working." I took a single photo. My daughter, fragile but awake, holding her thumb halfway up. I uploaded it to the family group text. 14 recipients. I wrote, "Surgery was a success. She's in recovery and asking for family." According to the live stream timestamps, the gala across town was just serving dessert. Marcus replied within 60 seconds. "Busy with the event. Handle it." My mother's response arrived while I was still staring at his screen. "She survived. Stop making her recovery our burden." I stood in that silent room, listening to the rhythmic hum of the heart monitor. I read those 2 messages over and over again. 12 other family members received those texts. People who had bought tickets to the gala, worn the sashes, and shared the updates. Not a single person typed a word of protest. I memorized every single name associated with that silence. Then I relied on 35 years of automatic conditioning. I typed back, "It's fine," slipped the phone into my pocket, walked down to the fire exit stairwell at the end of the corridor, and cried quietly into my hands. We returned home 5 days later to a stack of medical mail. Healthcare billing arrives in relentless waves. Even with decent coverage, our deductible reset, coinsurance liabilities, out-of-pocket caps, travel expenses, and weeks of unpaid family leave added up to over $12,000 in out-of-pocket obligations. Meanwhile, the public total on the Hope for Clara campaign page reached an astonishing $128,000. As a bookkeeper, I didn't need a spreadsheet to recognize the staggering discrepancy between those figures. I wrote to Marcus again, sending a formal email with an itemized breakdown of our actual medical liabilities, requesting a disbursement to cover the bills. 3 days of silence passed before a single electronic transfer arrived, $3,500. The transaction memo read, "Final settlement." I called Marcus immediately. For once he picked up. In his calm tone, he explained that the remaining balance had been permanently allocated. The family leadership, a group I was apparently excluded from, had decided that the capital needed to be managed under a broader structure. "We are establishing a legacy initiative in her name, Evelyn," he told me. "It's what makes the most sense long-term." I asked him what could possibly take priority over the actual child whose medical condition had generated those contributions. He used a specific phrase, "the foundation." Then he hung up to attend a real estate showing. It took me less than 2 weeks to uncover what my brother had constructed. It had an official corporate seal, a dedicated bank account, and professional branding. It had everything except my daughter's actual involvement. The Clara Vance Pediatric Heart Foundation, registered through the Ohio Secretary of State Business Registry in early May. Executive Director, Marcus Vance. Treasurer, Eleanor Vance. Mission statement: providing systemic advocacy and administrative resources for families facing pediatric health crises. A high-sounding description that served everyone except the single child involved. There was a polished website featuring a prominent donation portal, and an unauthorized picture of Clara taken during an Easter dinner 2 years prior. There was already an announcement for the second annual gala, bold terminology for an entity barely 3 weeks old. And then I saw the public advertising. While driving home from Clara's post-operative checkup, we stopped at a traffic light on West Market Street. Right there on a public transit shelter bench was Clara's face, printed life-size alongside the foundation's emblem. Directly beneath it, displayed in navy and gold lettering, was the corporate logo for Marcus's real estate agency. Matching color palettes, identical typography. My child's medical recovery had been repurposed as a promotional tool for commercial real estate. From the back seat, Clara looked out the window, saw her picture, and asked in a quiet voice, "Mommy, why am I on that bench?" I swallowed hard and replied, "Some people like putting pictures in public places." She thought about that for a moment and whispered, "But nobody asked if it was okay." 8 years old, and she saw the truth instantly. Nobody asked. That night, I opened my gray binder, created a fresh tab, and labeled it in bold permanent marker, "The Foundation." I attempted to resolve this directly. My mother continued to host traditional Sunday dinners at her house. I waited until dinner was finished, and Clara was playing in the adjoining room. Then, in a calm tone, I asked my mother why an entity bearing my daughter's name had been registered without my consent, and where the $128,000 in public contributions had gone. My mother did not flinch. She smoothed the linen tablecloth with her palm. "Sit down, Evelyn," she said. I was already seated. Then she delivered her core philosophy. "This family's reputation is built on its standing in this town. Your father left us with debts and an unfunded estate. I maintained our family name through sheer willpower. I will not apologize for keeping our family visible and respected." I responded that my daughter's healthcare expenses were not a threat to our family's social standing. She looked at me with cold condescension and explained that the foundation protected the long-term capital, that Marcus understood public perception, and that donors contribute to lasting causes, not to one family's temporary hardship. One family's temporary hardship. That was how my daughter's open-heart surgery was categorized. Then she leaned across the table and offered a strange piece of advice. "Do not sign any legal documents without letting us review them first." As if I were the one acting dishonestly. Every evening after Clara went to sleep, I sat at my kitchen table with a hot cup of tea and my gray binder, doing what I do for corporate clients 40 hours a week, forensic accounting. I cross-reference campaign screenshots with public event announcements, social media totals, the novelty check, and the two minimal bank deposits issued to me, $2,500 and $3,500, against my $12,000 stack of actual medical receipts. Dates, figures, sources, and missing balances. Numbers are simple, objective facts. If you align them correctly, they tell an unmistakable story. And the most glaring discrepancy didn't even come from my ledger. During Clara's follow-up consultation in Cleveland, a hospital social worker named Maria sat down with us. While helping me complete paperwork for the financial assistance office, she mentioned that the pediatric cardiology wing had a direct patient support fund. Then she added carefully, "We were surprised when we never received the pledge from your family's foundation event." I asked her to clarify. At the gala held on the night of Clara's surgery, Marcus had stood at the podium and publicly announced a major corporate donation from the foundation directly to the Children's Hospital Cardiac Wing. Maria had seen the clip herself. But in the weeks following the announcement, the hospital's donor relations department had received absolutely nothing. $0. I confirmed this in writing with the hospital's finance office. The medical facility that had operated on my child's heart had been utilized as a background set for a photo opportunity. The public applause had been collected, while the actual monetary pledge remained completely fictional. Up until that point, I had tried to give my family the benefit of the doubt, assuming they were merely self-absorbed, obsessed with appearances, and emotionally distant. But announcing a $25,000 charitable gift to a children's medical center, without ever sending the funds, isn't vanity. It is deliberate fraud. And if their most public commitment was fraudulent, then the remaining balance, over $100,000, wasn't being saved for a foundation. It was being siphoned. I attempted a formal approach first. In mid-June, I sent a certified letter to Marcus as foundation director and my mother as treasurer, requesting a formal accounting of all funds collected under my daughter's name. In response, my mother called a family meeting. When I arrived at her home, the dining table had no place settings. Marcus sat on one side. His wife Rachel sat quietly looking down at her hands. My mother sat at the head of the table, and a single manila folder rested in front of an empty chair. I sat down. My mother expressed concern for my emotional stability. Marcus used the word ungrateful while maintaining a sorrowful expression. They claimed I was overwhelmed, fixating irrationally on financial details, and not thinking clearly since the surgery. Then my mother slid the folder toward me. Inside was a legal media release form. It granted the Clara Vance Pediatric Heart Foundation perpetual, exclusive rights to use my daughter's name, likeness, image, and medical history for promotional and organizational purposes. In exchange for these perpetual rights, the contract offered exactly zero financial consideration. "Sign the release," my mother stated cold-heartedly. "And all this unnecessary tension stops." I picked up the pen. Decades of automatic compliance surged through me. The familiar words rested right at the edge of my lips. "It's fine. It's okay." And then I remembered an 8-year-old voice asking, "But nobody asked if it was okay." I put the pen down on the table. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. A call from the hospital. I stood up, walked away from the table, ignored my mother's voice, and answered the call on the front porch. It was Dr. Sterling's office. Clara's post-operative ultrasound showed that while the valve repair was functioning, there was localized vascular narrowing that was not resolving independently. They needed to schedule a cardiac catheterization procedure for early January. A less invasive procedure, but still requiring general anesthesia, specialized equipment, and a 2-night hospital stay. When the billing department sent over the advance fee estimate, an $8,000 deposit due before the end of December due to deductible resets, I realized this was no longer just about addressing past misdeeds. It had an immediate deadline. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, pulled out a thick black marker, and wrote across the spine of my gray binder, "Clara, full accounting." Then I logged onto the crowdfunding platform's administrator portal, navigated to the compliance section, and clicked Report Fraudulent Use of Campaign Funds. I attached 34 pages of documentation. Financial reconciliations, hospital communications, the unfulfilled pledge, marketing materials, and bank transfer receipts. Then I submitted the file. Within 48 hours, the administrative compliance team froze the campaign entirely. Every balance withdrawal was locked. A prominent warning banner appeared across the public page. This campaign is currently under administrative review pending documentation. Marcus attempted to call my phone 11 times in a single afternoon. I let every call go directly to voicemail, listening to his tone shift across the recordings. Call 1. The casual brother trying to clear up a minor misunderstanding. Call 5. The transactional negotiator offering to settle on a specific amount. Call 9. The furious victim accusing me of attempting to destroy the family. Then, at 9:30 that evening, my mother left a single voicemail. Her voice was cold and measured. Evelyn, I do not know what absurd game you are playing, but you will not drag this family's reputation through the mud. Call your brother immediately and repair what you have disrupted. Notice what was missing. She didn't ask about Clara. Not once. On Sunday afternoon, my mother published a public message from her social media account. It was carefully crafted. It avoided mentioning my name directly, instead referencing a season of intense stress for our family, a young mother struggling under immense emotional strain, and how medical trials test everyone's stability. Then came the core sentence. Our foundation was established precisely to ensure that public contributions are managed with legal structure and professional oversight, regardless of the emotional pressures facing individual family members. She framed me, the mother who had spent nights sleeping in an ICU visitor chair, as an unstable relative whom the public funds needed to be protected from. Her post received hundreds of supportive comments and reactions within hours. By Wednesday morning, an investigator from the County Child Protective Services Department knocked on my front door. An anonymous report had been filed alleging that a medically vulnerable child was residing in an unstable environment with an emotionally unfit parent. I stood in my doorway, took a long breath, and invited her inside. Innocent people with complete records have nothing to hide. She examined our home, inspected the organized medication logs attached to the refrigerator, checked the pantry, reviewed Clara's upcoming medical appointments, and spoke with Clara privately. Weeks later, an official notice arrived confirming the report was entirely unfounded. But legal vindication doesn't erase the emotional toll. Clara had overheard a fragment of the caseworker's initial conversation. After the investigator left, I found Clara sitting on the stairs, clutching her stuffed toy, and asking quietly, "Is that person going to take me away?" I sat down beside her on the step and reassured her. "No, sweetheart. Never. She was just making sure our house was safe, and she saw how well cared for you are." That evening, my phone buzzed. A text message from Rachel, my sister-in-law. "Can we meet for coffee? Away from the neighborhood." We met at a quiet diner near the highway the following evening. Rachel looked exhausted. She set a plain paper folder on the table. "I handle the administrative bookkeeping for Marcus's real estate firm," she explained quietly. "Marcus doesn't track fine details." Inside the folder were printed bank statements from the foundation's primary account covering May through July. Rachel walked me through the entries. A $12,000 charge for a resort venue retreat, listed as an administrative strategy seminar. Attendees: Marcus and Eleanor Vance. Recurring monthly lease payments for a luxury SUV, categorized as a corporate outreach vehicle. An invoice paid to a residential remodeling contractor for modernizing the kitchen in my mother's home, documented as an official administrative office expenditure. Line item after line item of public contributions intended for my daughter's heart surgery spent on personal luxuries. I asked Rachel why she was providing these records to me. She stared out the window for a long moment and replied, "Because I sat in the room when they planned how to reframe this story about you. My children are growing up in this family, and I refuse to let them think this behavior is normal. If you're going to put an end to this, do it properly." Pasted to the bottom of the last bank statement was a business card. Tess Calloway, investigative reporter, Channel 5 News. I scheduled a meeting with Tess Calloway that Friday. We met in a small conference room at the station. I laid out the facts systematically. The original campaign, the surgery, the cold text messages, the foundation registration, the unfulfilled hospital pledge, and the bank statements. Tess listened attentively for 20 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, she noted that an investigative report required 3 primary elements: verified documentation, which I had provided in full; official state oversight involvement; on-camera testimony from an primary source. She explained that she could help me submit a formal complaint directly to the charitable law section of the State Attorney General's office. Then she asked if Clara would appear on camera for the broadcast. The production coordinator suggested that featuring the child directly would increase the story's emotional impact. I declined firmly. No camera appearances, no personal interviews, and no footage of my daughter. My child will not be used for broadcast ratings. Tess accepted my decision, though she cautioned that without featuring the child directly, the narrative would rely entirely on the financial records. She also emphasized one crucial financial reality. If the crowdfunding platform confirmed fraud, all frozen balances would be refunded directly to the original individual donors. None of that money would go toward Clara's medical bills. Furthermore, moving forward with a public news report would permanently eliminate any possibility of a private financial settlement with my family. I looked her in the eye and said, "I review financial records for a living. I have never seen a ledger where compromised integrity yields a positive return." On Monday morning, I delivered a 40-page formal complaint to the charitable law section of the State Attorney General's office, complete with bank records, campaign documentation, and a notarized affidavit. On Friday afternoon, I sat in the studio under bright studio lights and recorded the on-camera interview with Tess Calloway. I detailed the financial records calmly and methodically. Near the end of the interview, Tess asked me to read the exact text messages I had received while sitting in the pediatric intensive care unit on the night of Clara's surgery. I pulled out my phone and read them clearly into the microphone. "Marcus. Busy with the event. Handle it. My mother. She survived. Stop making her recovery our burden." My response: "It's fine." I paused, looked directly at the camera, and added, "I used that phrase my entire life to keep the peace. It was never fine. I was simply absorbing the cost and calling it family loyalty." The broadcast was scheduled to air on Tuesday evening at 10 o'clock. Per standard journalistic standards, the news team contacted Marcus and my mother on Monday afternoon to request an official response. At 6 o'clock on Tuesday evening, 4 hours before the broadcast, my mother arrived at my house. I stepped out onto the front porch to meet her, closing the front door behind me so Clara wouldn't be disturbed. My mother held out a thick manila envelope. Inside was $40,000 in bank cashier's checks. "Full reimbursement," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Marcus is selling his luxury vehicle. I took out a line of credit against the house. Contact the television reporter. Tell her there was an internal misunderstanding, and cancel the story. The foundation will be quietly dissolved in the autumn, and our family remains intact." I looked down at the envelope. That money would have paid for Clara's upcoming procedure, and provided a significant financial safety net. All it required was one phone call to retract my statement. It was the ultimate test of the pattern I had lived with for 35 years. Absorb the truth, accept the payment, and pretend everything was fine. I looked my mother in the eyes and gently pushed the envelope back toward her. "This family depends on its reputation, Evelyn," she said desperately. "You are about to burn down everything we built." I replied quietly, "My daughter is a human being, Mom, not a public relations asset. Human beings don't exist to protect a family brand." She stared at me, pulled the envelope back, turned around, and walked down the steps to her car. At 10 o'clock that evening, I sat on my living room floor and watched the broadcast. The investigative segment was titled "Following the Fundraising Trail." Tess Calloway presented the facts with absolute clarity, displaying the financial breakdowns on screen. $128,000 raised, $6,000 provided to the family, $25,000 pledged to the hospital but never delivered, thousands spent on resort stays, vehicle leases, and home renovations. The report confirmed that the State Attorney General's office had opened an official investigation, that the campaign had been frozen, and that full refunds were being issued to all donors. Then 2 text message bubbles filled the screen while my voiceover played. "Busy with the event. Handle it. She survived. Stop making her recovery our burden. Across town, the impact was immediate. Marcus was at a business dinner where the restaurant TV was tuned to Channel 5. My mother was at a community gathering where the broadcast was being watched in the lounge. By midnight, my phone had received over 200 messages from extended family members, acquaintances, and strangers. Relatives who had remained silent during Clara's surgery were suddenly reaching out, offering opinions about family loyalty. I did not read the texts. I opened the family group chat one final time, selected the options menu, clicked Leave Group, and placed my phone on the counter. The legal and administrative consequences unfolded rapidly over the following weeks. Marcus's real estate brokerage issued a public statement severing their business relationship with him. His promotional billboards along the highway were replaced within a month. The foundation was officially dissolved under state supervision. The crowdfunding platform systematically refunded every single dollar back to the original contributors. And then something remarkable happened. On Thursday morning, Maria called me from the hospital's financial office. Donors who had received campaign refunds were contacting the hospital directly, asking how to contribute funds so they would go straight to Clara's medical care. The hospital set up a verified, restricted patient support account. Within 10 days, direct public contributions completely covered the $8,000 deposit for Clara's January procedure, paid off her remaining medical balances, and left additional funding to assist other pediatric heart patients. The help arrived. It simply bypassed the toxic structure of my family entirely. Clara underwent her cardiac catheterization procedure during the second week of January. The procedure was entirely successful, the vascular narrowing was corrected, and she was discharged 2 days later. In the spring, the state attorney general's inquiry concluded with a formal consent decree. Marcus and my mother were required to pay restitution costs, and signed a binding legal agreement permanently prohibiting them from founding or directing charitable organizations within the state. Rachel filed for divorce shortly thereafter, and moved into a house near ours. We now assist each other with school pickups and childcare, creating a healthy, supportive environment for our kids. In April, a year after Clara's surgery, a single envelope arrived in my mother's handwriting. Inside was no letter of apology, only a short note written on the back of an old foundation card. You remain a Vance. I pulled out my heavy gray binder, now containing over 300 pages of documents, financial records, and legal resolution notices. Storage closet. Archived, documented, and closed. We host Sunday dinners at my home now. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine connection. Maria from the hospital often joins us, bringing homemade pastries. Sarah, the pediatric floor nurse, stops by after her hospital shifts. Rachel and her children fill the table with laughter. Not a single seat is occupied by anyone who demands performance in exchange for affection, but every chair is filled by someone who genuinely showed up when it mattered. A few weeks ago during dinner, Clara accidentally spilled a glass of juice across the table. "Mommy, it's fine. It's fine," she blurted out anxiously, grabbing napkins. I knelt beside her, looked into her eyes, and said gently, "Hey, sweetheart. It's okay to be upset when things spill. You don't have to pretend everything is fine when it's not. Real family helps clean up the mess." She looked at me, smiled, wiped up the spill, and asked for another glass of juice. That is my story. One photo sent in a moment of distress, 2 cold text messages, and a public news report that cost me a toxic family dynamic while granting my daughter a healthy future. If this narrative reminds you of a situation where you had to stand alone, let us know in the comments below. And if someone in your life needs encouragement to step away from unhealthy expectations, consider sharing this video with them. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next story.